Thanks for coming out this morning to everybody, and thank you everybody out in streaming video land for joining us today. Hey, that's me. All right, so I changed the title of my talk a little bit. I took the word Googleization out of the title, mostly because since February, I've done just about nothing but try to sell people my book, and I'm really tired of selling books. I'm really tired of selling stuff. So much of what I have to say today is actually a process of unselling. It may actually, if you happen to own some of my books, cause you to put them up on the used market. In 2004, I wrote a book that almost no one bought, and it was called The Anarchist in the Library. And in 2004, I thought I had it all figured out. In fact, I knew almost nothing about what was about to happen. In 2004, I thought I had traced the conflict between tendencies toward anarchism and tendencies toward oligarchism through electronic networks in a global flow. I had no idea how wrong I was in the sense that I was early. I didn't have the data. I didn't have the stories. I didn't have the evidence. Turns out Clay Shirky had the evidence, and he wrote a far better book with actual examples and actual stories that moved people and made sense, and it's had a tremendous effect on how we think about a lot of these issues. In addition, Evgeny Morozov has written the other side of my book, because I was actually trying to talk about the inherent tension and the ways in which tendencies toward radical democracy can happen, but also invite tremendous blowback from powerful institutions. Those institutions might, of course, be oppressive states, but they might as well be oppressive firms as well. And so now we're in a moment where the work that these two gentlemen have done in their two books much better illustrate our current situation and in many ways our current dilemma. So don't buy my book, whatever you do. It's really not going to take you through, unless you really care about Napster. I've got way too much about Napster in there. And that's actually what inspired it, right? This notion that peer-to-peer unmediated communication might actually create almost an intellectual and political revolution. No, didn't really happen that way. I totally missed the social, as many people did, and in fact, that's why I wrote a book about Google, talking about missing the social. All right, so this past year, wow, what a year, right? What we've seen is a lot of this tension actually put into play. And as we saw first with the WikiLeaks events of late 2010, and then, of course, the Arab Spring of early 2011, we saw a number of interesting phenomena happen. We saw companies act like companies, right? When in late November 2010, Amazon decided to stop assisting WikiLeaks, that was quickly followed by MasterCard, and that was quickly followed by PayPal. A lot of my friends, a lot of the folks in this audience were tweeting angrily, how could these companies do this? How could these companies chicken out, not make a stand for free speech? And my reaction almost instantly was, what did you expect? Right? Amazon, after all, remember, this is November of 2010. Amazon, after all, is a department store, and Christmas is coming. And Bill O'Reilly's talking about WikiLeaks every night. The last thing Amazon wanted was to be a target of Bill O'Reilly's show as the WikiLeaks scandal, in his view, blossomed, right? The last thing any company wants is to be hauled before that court, right? So forget Joe Lieberman. Nobody cares about Joe Lieberman, right? Bill O'Reilly, there's a powerful, powerful figure. That's someone to avoid if you run a big business, right? And Amazon is functionally a department store, first and foremost. In addition, we saw in the wake of the use of Facebook in a variety of contexts in North Africa and in the Middle East, a rising concern for the fact that Facebook can't or more likely won't, allow anonymity in their activities, right? In their users' profiles, or pseudonymity, right? That became a big problem because, of course, we're worried about protecting people who are trying to make a stand against oppressive regimes, and it hasn't taken long for governments to figure out how to use Facebook against protesters, right? Nobody's going to make the mistakes that the governments of Tunisia and Egypt made. And so we see almost instantly the problems in depending on private firms to do important human work. Now, this is what we've long thought the internet could do for us, right? This is what we long thought we were actually building and enjoying. We thought there was something like a public square, or to use a different shape, a public sphere. No, that hasn't happened. Elements of it certainly get simulated, but in fact, we're nowhere near having the platforms and the fora around the world to host real political action in a fully deliberative way, right? We're nowhere near that. What we have instead is a rally in a shopping mall or a debate in a Starbucks. And there are limits to what you can do in a shopping mall and in a Starbucks. You can do politics in a shopping mall and you can do politics in a Starbucks, but there are lines you can't cross, and all too often people hit those lines. Now there's another part of this. There's another part of this, and that is the blowback, the anarchistic blowback, right? When we saw companies like Amazon and companies like PayPal and MasterCard make decisions that their leaders thought were in the best interest of the company, and really, there's nothing wrong with that. We saw a tremendous amount of shenanigans, right? Angry blowback from activists dispersed around the web, dispersed around the net, using distributed denial of service attacks, which after all are the heckler's veto of the internet. And what we see in this situation is the breakdown of civil society, right? This is not a blow for civil society. It's not a blow for speech. It's actually an example of the breakdown in a rather nasty conflict. And I don't think it's something that we should be celebrating, but I do think it's something that we should take seriously. Now, of course, there is great hope. And the great hope comes from those activists, those platforms, those leaders, those thinkers who are actually building structures, networks, technologies that support civil society, that support actual politics, responsible politics. Here are a few of them. You'll be meeting many of the people involved in these organizations over the next 2 days. I happen to be a huge fan of the diaspora guys, by the way, right? They saw that Facebook does not actually act in the internet way, or in the way that we've always thought the internet should work, right? That it's actually like an eddy of data that doesn't have to be there, that you can actually design some stuff that can do much of what Facebook does without having to route it through a black box like Facebook. So I think we all share great hopes that the folks running diaspora, the young men running diaspora, can actually build something useful. But real politics is what we should be after. So here's a couple of takeaways of this. Number one, I have a hypothesis that corporate social responsibility is actually bad for us. Now, I'm not sure I'm right. In fact, I hope I'm wrong. I came to this hypothesis one day when I was stuck in traffic in my Prius on the way to Whole Foods to buy fair trade coffee. And I was stuck there surrounded by pickups and SUVs, and I said, this was like August in Charlottesville, Virginia. I said, is the world any cooler because I'm stuck in this little Prius? And believe me, I'm not comfortable in a Prius, right? I paid a price for that, right? So I started thinking, like, how much of a difference is this making? Is this act or this series of acts just making me feel good? Or is it actually making a difference in the world? Am I avoiding real politics because I'm so happy that I drive a Prius to Whole Foods to buy fair trade coffee. I can't say that labor conditions in Central America are any better because of my acts. I can't say that foreign policy in this country is any better because of what I buy. And I can't say that the earth is getting any cooler. Now, as I said, that's a hypothesis. I hope I'm wrong. I'd like to keep living as I live and feeling good about it. It's better to feel good about what you do than bad. And I'd love for you to prove me wrong, because then I wouldn't have to write a book about it, right? And that would be great for all involved, especially my wife, who's really tired of me getting on these long, long processes of writing books. The other takeaway of this that I'd like you to think about, what if there is no internet? In fact, let's assume that for a second, that the internet does not exist. By that I mean that the internet, the word internet, is actually merely a word we use to represent the network of networks. Look it up on Wikipedia. Internet is the network of networks. And in fact, what we really should be focusing on is not just the connectivity enabled by these networks, enabled by TCP/IP, not just the community fostered. That's all important. We have to recognize that, in fact, we have never across this earth experienced a universal network of communication. It's never been that way. We have never across this earth experienced a universal body of knowledge that we can share. We in the United States have been pretty darn lucky because we've gotten to imagine that that's what we've been playing with for nearly 20 years now for most of us, right? Well, 15 years for most of us. But that's not the case, right? The Great Firewall of China is not an anomaly. In many ways, around the world, it's increasingly becoming the norm, just in different degrees. So while we pay a lot of attention to what's going on in China and how anti-internet-y that whole thing is, India is up to some of the same activities. Turkey is up to some of the same activities. And now, oh my God, don't get me started on France, right? So this is the situation we're in. Perhaps we're making a mistake by mythologizing the internet. Perhaps we should be focusing instead on the fact that we are dealing with discrete networks, any one of which can be blocked or taken down at any time, that we're dealing with real examples of oligarchic institutions, both commercial firms that have their own interests and rather oppressive states, and even states that aren't that oppressive get to be oppressive once in a while, right? And those states have very tight relationships with those firms. That's what we should be focusing on. And when we do that, when we focus on the specifics, on the internet service providers, on government policies, then we realize that the political activity that we must engage in is not merely a matter of starting up a platform and getting your friends together to hold a rally, right? That can change the world. We've seen it happen. But maybe that's not enough because maybe we're not done with the politics of the network itself. Maybe we should be engaging more firmly as citizens of our own state and not pretending we're citizens of some imaginary internet thing, because we're not. We're not even consumers of the internet for most of us, right? Because we may be consumers of our internet service providers, but more often than not, that's a monopoly situation. We can't really back out of it. We're not consumers when we deal with Google. We're not consumers when we deal with Facebook. We're just cattle to them, or rather worker bees, right? Because we not only are the product that those companies sell, but we contribute a lot of work to them to make them better, right? I watch a B movie way too much with my daughter, so I've got this in my mind, right? So that's the realization I think we have to get clear, right? That we are not citizens of the internet because there is no internet. We are citizens of, in my case, the United States. In your case, maybe some other state. And our duty is to fight for an open and free internet, or an open and free network situation, rather, right? We have to fight for network neutrality, at least in this country. We have to fight to ensure free and open culture, right? By making sure that there aren't excessive restrictions on the creativity that people engage in, excessive copyright, for instance, right? We need to make sure that free and open source software as a community can thrive. We have to make sure that those environments and communities like Wikipedia that are so important can thrive and can maintain the high level of quality that they have. We have to fight for specific policies that ensure freedom on the internet. We have to engage in good old-fashioned 20th century politics, because we can't just assume that we can draw a bunch of wires and a bunch of cables, a bunch of fiber optic cable, and drop down devices in front of people, and freedom will grow. There's a lot of hard work left to do. Thank you very much.